Welcome to the Fantasy Coaching Game Plan presented by Miller Lite. My name is Jimmy Rooney. I'm here to introduce the Miller Lite Fantasy Coaching Contest in the Pro Fantasy Coaching Game mobile app. Pro FCG is a mobile app that enables all fans to connect a game board to live football games, guess each upcoming play call in real time, and score points to rise up the leaderboards and win great prizes. This season, Miller Lite is offering prizes to the top scoring players during select Steelers games at partner venues in the Pittsburgh area. Download and register for the Pro FCG app and connect to a Steelers game in the app to enter. Participate for a chance to win tickets to Steelers versus Chiefs or Steelers versus Bengals at Acrisure Stadium at the end of the season. The more you play, the more chances you get to win. The game is entirely free to play, and there's no purchase necessary to participate in the contest. Find full contest and gameplay details in the show notes below. I'm joined today by Steelers and NFL analyst Matt Williamson to analyze the Steelers and Bengals coaching tendencies and put together a game plan for how to make the best picks in the Pro Fantasy Coaching Game app this weekend. Matt, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks. How's things going? It's like to get back into it.
Yeah, things are good. Excited for another game to kind of work back from after last week, but feeling good so far. So how about you?
Real good. And this is a really interesting matchup. I mean, we know Cincinnati is dangerous. Joe Burrow might be having the best season of any quarterback in the league. Jamar Chase is on pace to win the Triple Crown for touchdowns, receptions, and yardage. And their offense is really humming. But what's crazy is they're almost identically bad on defense as they are on offense. And I mean, like, for example, the Bengals produce 0.9, under 1, more yards per game than they allow with an elite offense. So everything that they're doing on offense is getting canceled out by the defense. And they're losing a bunch of one-score games. And the 4 teams they've beaten have a combined record of 10-34. So they're losing to average teams or beating bad teams, but they're losing tons of close games basically because their defense can't hold up.
Right. And with such evenly good offenses and bad defenses, are a lot of their games one score so far?
1-6 in one-score games.
Wow.
So a pretty high percentage, but not winning any of them.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a good place to start. Now I guess we can dive into the specifics here. We got, the Steelers offense against the Bengals defense. You were able to find some stats about how the Steelers offense is playing this year. What can you tell us about the offense so far?
Well, first off, kind of an overview of this Bengals defense is they built a pretty nice defense, a lot of it through free agency. Hendrickson, Mike Hilton, DJ Reader, they went outside the organization and spent some money on defense. And the reason they were able to do that is because the offense was so cheap, because they drafted Higgins, they drafted Chase, they drafted Burrow. So knowing that those big contracts are coming up for the Bengals, Cincinnati has recently really drafted defense heavily. They just haven't hit on anybody. I mean, all these high picks that they've invested in aren't paying off for them. So Hendrickson's really the guy to know here, because there's only 2 teams that rush the passer worse than Cincinnati, and that's Atlanta and Carolina, who are both really, really terrible. But they shouldn't be, because Hendrickson, I think, is leading the league in sacks right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're the sack leader, but you're the 3rd worst pass rushing team in the league. It just shows that he's carrying so much weight for this defense, and the other 10 are rarely doing their job.
And that last point, I guess specifically is, Hendrickson has been their standout, and obviously he's matched up with Dan Moore, who seemed to have a pretty positive start of the year, but had a tough game against Cleveland. So what do you see there?
Yeah, and it's easier said than done, but I'm sure Moore will get a lot of help. Darnell Washington, running back, staying in. But doesn't every offense do that against Cincinnati? And he still leads the league in sacks. So I do think dealing with Myles Garrett is a different animal than dealing with Hendrickson, of course. Garrett is just an utter superstar. And I tend to trust that Moore has had a good year and had a bad game against a great player and should be able to hold his own with a lot of help.
Great. And then, so we'll see how that matchup plays out. Other than, the one standout pass rusher, you mentioned they don't have much of a pass rush. It sounds like they don't have a great coverage unit either. Um,
No,
and,
I mean,
and
they really
yeah.
don't have great anything on defense. I wouldn't say any. What's weird about this defense to me is Hendrickson aside, I don't see any greatness, that's for sure. And collectively, it's a very poor defense. But I also don't look at there's just one massive gaping hole. Like you can run on them pretty well, you can throw on them pretty well. The linebackers are okay, the secondary's okay. But collectively, it just hasn't been good at all, really, for 2 years now.
Got it. So it sounds like there's sort of opportunity all over the place. What do you think the Steelers will do to attack that unit?
That's a great question. That I don't have as good a feel for because
Mhm.
the Steelers' run game has created a lot of explosive runs, 10 plus yards,
Yep.
but they still only average, like they're sixth in the league in explosive runs, but you still only average 3.9 yards a carry as a team. So that's also a lot of negative runs, a lot of 1 yards, 2 yards. And I know a lot of people are talking about the red zone offense, and let's just start there real quick.
Yep.
Steelers are third worst in red zone offense. Bengals are second worst in red zone offense. But over the last month or so, the Bengals are like off the charts bad in the red zone. So you would think this is a get right game for Russ and, getting the ball into the end zone. And I hope and think it will be. But I really think the thing that's ailing the Steelers offense the most is just not consistency in the run game. Yeah, you're breaking off some nice runs, but down in, down out, you're not staying ahead of the chains and getting to where you need to be.
Mhm.
And as you can see by this chart, they run the ball a ton. I
Yeah.
mean, they're about as run heavy as any team in the league. And no matter what down and distance, but there's some obvious ones here that are really standing out.
Yeah, and so that's good to know in terms of the Steelers are always more likely to run the ball, even in the now we have a full sample size with Russell Wilson as the starter, and that seems
Mhm.
to have held up. They're still a heavy running team. What yeah, what specifically, I guess, should people be looking for in this game when they're trying to choose run pass? Typically Steelers will run the ball, but when should they be looking to break that tendency, I guess?
Yeah, and we know they'll take their shots as well. They'll go downfield without question. The one thing that stood out here though to me was after they throw for a first down, they immediately go right back to the run. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a tendency that really stands up. And when I saw that for the first time, like, oh yeah, I mean, watching games, you feel that in a big way.
Mhm.
A complaint I have, but could work to the advantage of our viewers right now, is I think the Steelers call far too many runs on second and long and second and medium. And why I say that is I think the goal when you do that is to get the third down. If it's second and 8, okay, we'll make it a manageable 3rd and 3. Yeah, but that's not how the league works now. If you get the third down, more often than not, it's a negative play for the offense. So you have to score, you have to get first downs on first and second down. Like when I look at third down percentage, they were 7 out of 16 on third downs. Okay, I care about the percentage, but immediately I go to the denominator and
16.
say, yeah, there's 16 attempts on third down. That's your problem. You're snapping the ball on third down too often. And I think a big reason why is all the second and long runs, which I understand why they do it, especially early in games. They're trying to wear down the defense. They're landing body blows. And that has worked because the Steelers have been a much better second half team than their opponents. That being said, it's hard to deal with. And we have a bye week a couple weeks ago. We have a 10-day rest now. So you would hope that they've gone back to the drawing board a little bit and try to get out of some of those tendencies.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll see. And so it sounds like they've been pretty consistent with the running on early downs, especially second downs
For
more
sure.
than the
Yeah.
rest of the league. Um, when people are playing at home and again in our game, you can try to guess run or pass, but then also you try to guess, um, you know, how many yards a runner or pass will gain. The runs are on the left here.
Mhm.
you sort of mentioned the Steelers might be more likely to have the splash play 10+ yard runs or the explosive runs, or the more 1 to 3 yard run, no gains. They're kind of boom or bust, it sounds like. Um,
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I
is
mean,
there is there anything that sort of stands out about when they're able to break the explosive runs or when they're, having the shorter runs? To me, it sounds like maybe those predictable situations when teams know, oh, they completed the pass, they're going to go back to the run. Or is there anything that stands out about when they're getting the explosives and when they're not?
well, unfortunately, and this is more of a tape thing than a numbers thing, is I think the past 2 or 3 weeks, Najee has looked a lot more sluggish. Like
Mhm.
I thought he looked really explosive. And then these past 3 weeks or so, it looks like he's having a hard time really getting up and going. And same with Patterson. Patterson doesn't look nearly as explosive. So I would definitely bet that if you're leaning towards longer runs, it would be when Warren's in the game. And
Right.
he's back to
That's a good
playing a
key. Yep.
real heavy role again.
Yep. Okay. That's a good thing to look for. So we're thinking running downs a lot, but when Warren's in the game, there's an opportunity for some splash plays. Um, and then on the passing side, you've mentioned the Steelers, are usually a run heavy team. When they're throwing,
Mm-hmm.
they're still taking shots down the field. They're looking for, the 10 to 20 or splash play, 20+ yard pass plays that might be incomplete or might be big plays, but kind of not so much in the shorter passing yardages.
Yeah, and this is definitely a Russell Wilson trend,
Hmm.
but he's a big game hunter. I mean, I always use the analogy that he's got a putter and a chipper, but he doesn't have any other irons. He pulls the driver out, so he's gonna throw deep. He is fourth right now in average depth of target, so they're going to take shots every week, all the time, and that's not going away. I don't think.
Great. Are there any last keys you want to throw out for the Steelers offense versus Bengals defense?
Hmm. I don't think so. I think that they'll try to do so a little bit more in breaking routes. We saw a little bit of that slants and
Mhm.
a little bit more over the middle. That's not their specialty, but
We saw
that's
some
not what
more
they do.
targets for
Yeah,
Fryermuth last week. It seemed like.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a good one too. Is the Bengals are basically the worst defense in the league against tight ends,
Mhm.
and Washington and Fryermuth are both pretty heavily involved now. I think that will continue.
Great. Okay. Great. So we got some good keys on that side of the ball. Now we can flip to talking about the Bengals offense against the Steelers defense. Obviously we got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. What can you tell us about how they're attacking teams this year?
Polar opposite. They throw,
Yep.
throw, 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 and
Mhm.
they're really, really good at it. And they can attack you in all different ways. Even Chase Brown, their running back, is an accomplished receiver. Gasecki, their tight end, is much more receiver than blocker. He can get downfield. Chase is making a very strong argument of being the best wide receiver in all of football. Higgins has been spectacular when he's been out there too. I think he's had his best year when healthy. Burrow's been absolutely at his best. But can they protect? I mean, that seems to be the question, and that's an issue. Um, they do. I know this isn't part of the game, but the Steelers are seeing a really high percentage of inside runs between the tackles, and the Bengals are a very, very high percentage inside run team too. So just keep that in mind.
Mhm.
When they're running, has it been up the middle? Has that been successful or not? Will they try to bounce stuff to the outside? They don't do that well, and teams don't do it against the Steelers very much. So it's almost all Brown as the runner, and it's a lot of up the middle stuff.
Great. So, um, big picture, it looks like we're most of the time the Bengals have the ball. We should be anticipating pass. We're going to be picking pass a lot.
Yeah,
Um, all situations really looks like maybe third and less than three. Maybe they run the ball a little bit more, but
a little. The
little,
the
yeah.
second down stuff really stands out to me is they
Mhm.
throw heavily no matter what the situation is on second downs. First,
Yeah.
if it's, short yardage, if it's mid yardage, if it's long yardage, they come out throwing on first downs a ton. And I also thought it was noteworthy the total opposite of the Steelers when they do run for first down. Oh, time to get back to throwing. Like they don't want to drift too far away from it at all.
Yeah.
They average the most passing yards per game in the league, so they throw and they throw well.
Right. So then, when they're throwing, I don't have that. Yeah, here we go. When they're throwing, what does sort of their, I guess, their depth of target, average, yards per completion, things like that? Are they throwing deep downfield, shorter? What can we
All the
tell?
above. And those guys are both really good after the catch. All those guys are good after the catch. So they do generate big plays even when throwing short.
Right.
So that might be a little bit more of the game plan this week. I know the Steelers' sack numbers aren't great, but every team fears their front. So I don't think they're going to want Burrow holding the ball a really, really long time. So maybe they count a little bit more on catch and run, but the Steelers tackle really well and get a lot of people to the ball. They're a fast defense. And one other thing to look at too, that I think that we'll see even more of, they use 5.5% of their snaps. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's an awful lot. Has a sixth offensive lineman on the field. And with the Steelers' problems that presented, from their defensive line, maybe you bring out more heavy personnel, an extra offensive lineman in this one to help protect.
Okay.
And I would look for deep shots when that happens.
Great. Okay. So if we see extra offensive line, deep passing, would that also be where they're going to try to, capitalize on some inside runs? Or
I would assume, but
Mhm.
yeah, especially if you get someone like Gesicki off the field,
Yeah.
he's tight end in name only. He's really just a big slot receiver that is no chance of blocking Watt, Highsmith, Queen, Roberts, those type of guys. So if they're replacing Gesicki with an offensive lineman, I think that's a bit of a tell.
Great. So primarily we're guessing pass. If they have sort of the normal five linemen, three receivers out on the field, then maybe they'd be looking for the shorter 5 to 9, 10 to 20 yard passes that they're looking for run after. The Steelers defense can be good at getting people down. So looking in that range. But if we see that extra offensive lineman on the field, that's when we're expecting more of the deep 20+ yard passing plays to
Yeah, I think that's
Mhm.
fair. And they complete a very high percentage of them as well. I mean,
Right.
their completion percentage is up there, but the Steelers' completion percentage is great. It's only behind the Texans and Jets in terms of their defense.
Great. So passing, we'll have to see how the drive is going. If they're moving the ball down the field, we're picking higher up on the game board. But if the Steelers defense is locking people down, we'll go with the incomplete passes. What do you think that the pass
One
rush?
other note I wanted to
Yeah,
mention
please.
there. Yeah, it's actually kind of what you're about to
Yeah.
bring up is only the Dolphins and Dallas are seeing a lower percentage of blitz, and the
Right.
Steelers are not a heavy blitz team either. So I would think that a couple things is I think that helps you tackle the catch. You got
Mhm.
7 guys
More
back
people
there
back.
that all cover ground. And Burrow is so good above the neck, people just aren't blitzing him because he knows where it comes from, hits Higgins on a slant, and then he's off and running.
Yeah. Right. So we're not expecting a lot of blitzes. What we've talked in the past about we have the kind of pass rusher matchups with the offensive linemen. Does that favor either team this week in terms of looking for sacks versus better blocking?
Yeah, it absolutely does. The Steelers pass rush to me is still elite, even though that the
Mhm.
sack numbers are very mediocre. Their pressure rate is still really strong. When we're recording this, I'm not sure if Orlando Brown's going to play the left tackle. I'm not sure if Highsmith's going to play, but I think he will.
Okay.
Um, but that being said, Burrow will stand in the pocket. He is tough as could be, but he also feels it really well. Even when his protection isn't great, he's only getting sacked on 6% of his dropbacks, and that's sixth best in the league, even behind an average offensive line.
Right. So if we're going to be making these sack picks, then the big thing to pay attention to is through the week who's going to be in the game with the left tackle and Highsmith, and then
I would
just in
assume
general.
because the matchup on the right side's an interesting one too. Is Amarius Mims was their first round pick,
Mhm.
and they didn't want him to start right away until the incumbent Jones got hurt. He's really, really raw, and he's incredibly talented. He's Broderick Jones' teammate on Georgia's offensive line, but he's played really well. Now, has he played really well enough to say we're going to leave him alone on TJ and help the left tackle, especially if it's not Orlando Brown? That seems a little ambitious to me from the Bengals perspective, because I think he's a really
Mm.
good prospect. He's not a great left tackle or right tackle yet, but I bet they will help the left side maybe more than some Steeler opponents have in the past.
Great. So in that matchup, I'm hearing the big thing to look for is really Burrow's pretty skilled at, avoiding sacks,
Yes.
but there might be an opportunity if for some reason TJ gets more one-on-one matchups this week, or if
Mm-hmm.
Highsmith is up against a backup, we'll kind of have to monitor that through the week.
I also think TJ didn't have his best game and has had 10 days to stew on it. I
Mm-hmm.
bet he has his best game.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, he's probably due to blow up. One other note along those lines is I don't think Burrow is widely considered a really good scrambling quarterback, but he is. He's a much better athlete than you think, and he's smart about it.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good about moving in the pocket with light feet, and he's a good scrambler. But a number I just found this morning is the Steelers have allowed the fewest rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks in the league. The Bengals have allowed the most. So keep that in mind on both sides of the ball, too. Maybe you have a couple more Wilson scrambles than you originally thought, or Burrow's not as effective when he does run.
Absolutely. Right. And that's where, yeah, if we're looking at obvious passing situations and you want to call a run play in our game, for the Bengals, it might be shorter yardage. For the Steelers, you might look at some longer yardage.
Yeah. And just run plays in general,
Mhm.
I wouldn't expect a lot of long ones. I mean, the Steelers have only given up 26 runs of 10 yards or more. That's fourth best in the league. And they're even though Chase Brown can hit the home run,
Yeah.
this defense doesn't allow many big runs.
Right. So when we are expecting run from the Bengals, we're going to be picking in the middle of the board here, the shorter yardage runs.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Excellent. So, do you have any last keys to give out?
Hmm. I expect the Steelers special teams uh, bounce back. It was
Yep.
not their best game this past week. Only the Saints, when you look at offense and defense, start drives with better field position than the Steelers too.
Okay.
So a lot of that's because they're elite in terms of taking the ball away and special teams. Like I post on Twitter every week a chart that just shows how much value you've gotten out of special teams and turnovers combined. And the Steelers are always alone in the top right, way more than any other team in the league.
Yeah. And so as always in the fantasy coaching game, there's opportunities to steal a lot of points. You can get large bonuses for, if you can pick a blocked field goal, blocked punt,
Mm-hmm.
turnovers, special teams returns, things like that. There's a lot of chances every time the special teams play starts to get large amounts of points for single picks. So
And last one along those lines is punt returners are averaging the fewest return yards against the Steelers of anyone in the league too.
great. So when we're picking the punt returns against the Steelers, we're expecting lower
Small
return
gains,
yards.
yeah.
Right. There's great another great thing to look for. So
Some
Matt,
strong trends in this game, yeah.
yeah, we're excited. We're excited for the matchup. Excited to get back to another Steelers chance to win. So thanks again for joining.
Good
Um,
stuff.
yeah, thank you so much for joining and all your great insights. Where can listeners find more of your work?
Yeah, I have a bunch of different podcast networks, Peacock and Williamson, The Drive on Steelers.com, but just follow me on Twitter at Williamson NFL.
Great. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Remember to use this expertise from Matt Williamson to win the next Miller Lite Fantasy Coaching Contest in the Pro Fantasy Coaching Game app. Thanks again to Matt Williamson for joining. Use his expert advice to win prizes at the next Miller Lite Fantasy Coaching Contest. Download and register for the Pro FCG app and connect to a Steelers game in the app to enter. Participate for a chance to win tickets to Steelers versus Chiefs or Steelers versus Bengals at Acrisure Stadium in week 17 and 18. The more you play, the more chances you get to win. Join live contests and win exclusive prizes at Coupe de Ville, Walter's Barbecue, Lot 17, The Clubhouse, Rochester Inn, Twin Peaks, Mulligan Sports Bar and Grill, and Monaco's Bar and Grill on select game days. The game is entirely free to play, and there's no purchase necessary to participate in the contest. Thank you for listening, and may the best coach win.